Good catch. It's Stark. Myth sign. It's an anagram for my things. Not even a clever anagram. He's not trying to be sneaky because he thinks this is beneath me. Let the deal go through, but send the wrong shipment in place of ST7981. Apologize profusely, blame shipping, and then send the rest of the garbage he has no interest in. When he asks about the missing lot, tell him it's adorable to see him so sentimental, and Monica will be sure to keep it close by. Then have legal file any and all lawsuits and complaints against MythSign LLC. Take the lawyers off their chains and let them smell blood. Bruce, I already made a bit of a fool of myself at our first meeting. I hope you won't hold it against me if I continue that trend. Can you blame me for being a little overwhelmed by my present company? You and Tony have been absolutely welcoming, and I wanted to thank you for making a difficult situation as frictionless as possible. I know that Dr. Tarleton can seem a little frosty, but he's privately told me that he's grateful for your magnanimity. It's been a hard transition for the both of us, adapting to the pace at which the Avengers work, but I promise that we're up to the challenge. You mentioned coffee earlier, and if that wasn't just a performative pleasantry, I'd like to call your bet and raise you. Let me take you to dinner. You're new in town, and I never go out, so it'll be a novelty to us both. Name the time, Dr. Banner. I'm game. Monica. Big guy, I'm so sorry if I worried you. That was so thoughtless of me not to think of how you must have felt. Look, Tony is not the first buffoon I've worked with, just the most famous. I know from experience that I gain nothing by making a scene, so I blew off my steam on a brisk walk. I must have had my phone off, and here you were thinking I was mad at you. Poor thing. I know you're in a hard situation, and I see you trying to make it right every day. That's all that matters. It's so sweet of you to get me lab time, but it's absolutely not necessary. Okay, twist my arm, I'll take it. Let me make it even. On Friday, we'll go back to my apartment, I'll cook up the number to a delivery place, and then we'll do something really decadent and wild, like go to bed at a reasonable time and sleep a full 8 hours. What do you say? M. Not going to get what I'm looking for from Bruce. While there's much to learn from his blood, his contribution to my regenerative formula is at an end. I've had essentially unfettered access to blood samples, but he requires significantly more tranquilizer in his food than a man of his size should, and that makes the extraction dangerous. Any more, and he would begin to suspect. I'll continue to maintain him as a strategic asset, but I can release the grip a bit now. No trace of the Hulk in Bruce's blood, and no way to provoke the change in the laboratory. Even tried screaming at the petri dish. The gamma fingerprint lingers, but nothing more. If I want to see the secrets in the monster's blood, I will need to find a way to take it directly from him. This is a challenge for tomorrow. And then there's Rogers. Don't yet know how to solve for him. I get the uncanny sensation when he looks at me that he sees. I'm not used to that, and it unnerves me. But by God, I want to know what flows in his veins. Dear Dr. Pym, as part of our recent acquisition of Stark Industries, I came into possession of a great deal of documents and correspondence that Stark had never responded to. Yours, of course, was among the numerous missed opportunities. Part of our company culture has been to not only learn from past failures, but to succeed where our predecessors did not. Stark and the rest of his associates have left behind ample opportunities for both. It has always been clear to me that Stark harbored some dull and juvenile resentment of you and your accomplishments, but we don't need to let that hinder us any longer. AIM would be honored to partner with Pym Technologies in the continuing relief and repair efforts in the Bay Area. Beyond that, I can think of a dozen initiatives that I would kill just to have you consult with us for an afternoon. But that's just scratching the surface. I'd love to meet at your earliest convenience. Monica. We're going to need to move up the timetable with Dr. Pym. He thought he had the leverage to deliver an ultimatum about our research with the inhuman subjects. As such, I've concluded that his usefulness as a willing ally has reached its natural end. I want him picked up before he hits the parking lot tonight. Use your best discretion. He's already running hot after his moral crisis and likely to behave irrationally when cornered. gloves off at your discretion. There's a cell prepped, third shielded sub-basement. Relocate him and report back. We will have a limited amount of time before a missing persons report is filed, and I have some creative bookkeeping and asset transfers to accomplish. If all goes as planned, we'll have majority ownership of his company, and he'll be legally declared dead. We already got more than our investment out of Dr. Pym. Now we just take him off the board for a few years. I find myself talking to him. I know his particular set of abilities don't give him the intelligence to understand what I'm trying to accomplish here, but lacking a similar intellectual confidant leaves me speaking with the ether, in subject's general direction. There's so much more we could gain from him beyond a regenerative formula or rapid cellular duplication or any other plate I currently have spinning. But that requires waking a sleeping dragon. And I happen to enjoy having my head firmly on my shoulders. Anyway, blood cultures are looking just as remarkable as last month and the month before that. I almost feel bad keeping this kind of marvel from George, but I suppose there are actually 2 sleeping dragons in my life at this moment. 60. Thank you for getting the station's private network operational. It seems even Tony Stark was unaware of his father's more esoteric enterprises. For someone so in love with his legacy, Tony spent precious little time maintaining it. Howard Stark prepared the station for war, so I imagine the transition into a working laboratory wasn't easy. You can be sure you will be handsomely rewarded in due time. Knowledge of this lab is to be shared with no one, AIM security clearance or no. You will be rewarded handsomely for your loyalty, but your livelihood is heavily dependent on you keeping your end of the bargain. Sincerely, M. Subject is now in what amounts to be a medically induced coma, which will allow us to do our experiments in some semblance of peace. We're still working on a way to do a full assessment of subject's unique abilities without giving away our location and scrapping the whole project. There are a number of ways forward here, and I've consulted with several experts on purely hypothetical methodology. Some suggested I still consider subject for the Adaptoid program, but his abilities are too tied to human physiology. Some also suggested we wake him up, but I've seen the damage he can do. Even in the vacuum of space, he's far from harmless. In the end, Dr. Gable and Thor provided us with one final experiment, and I suspect we will be parsing the data for some time. Gable fulfilled her purpose, just as intended. We learn from her failures as well as her successes. We move forward. Dr. Gable looked at the Asgardians and saw proof of the divine. I see no such thing. I see a stepping stone. The Asgardians are beings of great power, surely, but they fight, bicker, and die just like us. I did not collect those artifacts so that we could learn to better praise them. I did it so we could one day learn to surpass them. Today, we just took a great leap forward. Stop trying to throw each other to the wolves. I take full responsibility. Despite her education, Dr. Helen Gable had no business in our Asgard initiative from the beginning. All the markers were there. The rigid, legalistic thinking, the speech peppered with unconscious religious allusions, her childhood history. I knew all of it, and I put her in charge. Descent into hyper-religious mania was a predictable outcome. We don't know what Dr. Gable has planned with the artifacts that she stole, or how she was able to convert so many AIM personnel to her cause when she defected. Yes, this concerns me, but I don't regret it. Only a zealot's drive could have unlocked the secrets of those artifacts. What she uncovered before her delusions took her has already made the initiative a 10-fold success. Stark, I know you still check this address. Your antics are becoming tiresome. Stop them, or I'll be forced to take legal steps to make your life even more miserable than I imagine it already is. You're not the only faded hero who decided to secrete themselves in a cave of their own making. Find other ways to amuse yourself. Monica. To the extent that it's possible, I'm keeping the various project heads working on this research siloed and ignorant of each other's findings. It means I have to do most of the synthesis on my own, which takes time I resent spending. But I don't think most of them are ready to accept the implications of what we've uncovered. We have direct evidence of an alien race having visited the Earth nearly 70,000 years ago. At the same time, we have a subspecies of human arising, presumably through intentional extraterrestrial genetic modification. But there's another unpleasant alignment. The modification of inhuman DNA occurs at the same geological time as the Toba event, the largest volcanic eruption in 25 million years. In the decades-long winter after, human populations dropped to as low as 1,000 individuals. All things told, triggering a volcanic eruption of that size would not be terribly difficult for AIM today. It would just be suicidal. So it seems, in order to ensure rapid inhuman propagation, our alien visitors either took advantage of the genetic bottleneck caused by a global catastrophe, or they created it on purpose. It's taken a little more time than I would have liked to get back into the old routines. If anyone has noticed that I'm still a bit slower or unsteady on my feet, they've avoided mentioning it. It's a weakness I can't afford to show for much longer. I'm taking more of an interest in the alien artifacts that remain in AIM control following George's little tantrum. We have enough fragments and pieces of the extraterrestrial automaton to safely make a variety of conclusions. Spectrographs confirm the obvious. It's constructed from material originating outside our solar system. It's bipedal, suggesting its creators either share a similar structural morphology with us, or that they wanted to show a familiar form to the natives. It was also damaged at some point in the distant past, presumably when it was made to lay dormant beneath the bay. Given the presence of Terrigen in the automaton, I would say that the connection to the creation of the inhuman genome in the distant past is likely. Our need for Terrigen is only growing, but we need to be cautious drawing any more from the remains of the automaton. There are too many unanswered questions here. Assuming the aliens who created the inhuman genome are the same species who created the automaton beneath the bay, that gives us a rough timeline. The visitors arrive just before or just after a global catastrophe that reduces the human population of the Earth to only a few thousand. They take a portion of the survivors and alter their DNA for some unknown reason. This inhuman genome lies dormant until activated, and human populations begin to grow again, both inhuman and unaltered alike. Thousands of years later, they send the automaton. I surmise it was to observe their experiment. The automaton has weapons unlike any we've ever seen, but the vast majority of its systems are geared towards observation and recording. But when it arrived, someone here on Earth put it down, forcing it to hibernate beneath the bay. I don't like that unknown. There's another player on the board. Finally, just before its destruction, it sent a transmission. We're still trying to make sense of the chaos in the signal, but we can tell where in the sky it was pointing. Somewhere in the large Magellanic Cloud. All of which leaves us with a near inescapable conclusion. Sooner or later, they're coming back. I avoid intoxication. Social situations demand that I sometimes put on a show, but I am not in the habit of relinquishing control without getting something in return. That's out the window tonight. Just received the final report from the archaeology teams. Every geographic site we've linked to inhuman origins shows the same signs. Unmistakably extraterrestrial. This changes things. If they've been here once. I've opened a bottle, locked the doors, and blacked out the security system long enough for me to sink into oblivion for an evening. I deserve it. I am so lonely. I don't need something so trite or squalid as companionship. What I need is the one thing I cannot have. Someone I can depend on. I'm so tired of doing this alone. I just need there to be more of me. I don't blame the rest of them for resisting what AIM must do. Not everyone can see what's coming. If they understood what I was doing and why, they would try to worship me. But no, they must be dragged, kicking and screaming into salvation. I accept that. You have been selected to work with extremely confidential data on the basis of your intellect and abilities. New personnel at the Terrigen Initiative are expected to be familiar with all prior findings with regard to the experimental regenerative Terrigen hemoglobin catalyst formula, henceforth the regenerative formula. The company intranet has an archive of all previous research. The applications will become clear, but for the purposes of security and shareholder obligations, we filter our results. The primary goal must always appear to be the complete cure of the inhuman condition through use of the formula, even if your work takes you in another, more important direction. We at AIM have certain expectations of you. Failure to live up to expectations at this stage puts you in a dangerous position, operationally speaking. You have all been through rigorous vetting. We are working with arguably the most important discovery in the history of scientific inquiry. Do not disappoint. The inhuman death rate is concerning, but more worrying is the apparent correlation between the subject's desires and their individual manifestation post-terrigenesis. The more a subject is aware of the program and its risks, the more likely their enhancements will assist them in escape or resistance. We must be cautious. Keeping subjects isolated and ill-informed is the smartest approach. It's also becoming difficult to keep George unaware of the regenerative formula's importance in our research or in his own treatment. Without it, his condition would be terminal. But the formula allows me to direct the course of his transformation, and he remains my most important subject. He would kill me if he learned the truth. So many little calculated risks, but nothing else matters besides the work. We're on the event horizon of nothing less than total human evolutionary apotheosis, or extinction. Someone has to be the adult in the room and make the hard choices. Although we must always acknowledge the loss of human life on A-Day, we have been given an unprecedented opportunity, a large-scale human trial on the effects of exposure to Terrigen. Terrigen has an immediate reaction to water, creating a fine particulate mist. For a fraction of human subjects, this Terrigen mist has a profound transformative effect. We have since isolated a mitochondrial DNA shared by this subgroup. Thus far, only those we have dubbed inhuman have entered terrigenesis upon exposure. A closer examination of inhumans is underway, but the early reports are both fascinating and distressing. The genetic distinction in question arise identically from multiple geographically diverse populations. I've tightened the security on these reports, but it seems almost inescapable. At some point in the past, someone or something did this to us on purpose. Our understanding of terrigenesis continues to increase, with certain commonalities being identified. All inhuman subjects form a protective cocoon around their bodies during the process, though the structure is more akin to a chrysalis. I'm afraid the catchier name has stuck. The gestation period varies wildly, and the mortality rate is still high. But surviving subjects emerge changed, and from there, no two metamorphoses are identical. There also appears to be a psychosomatic component to the mutations, a connection between the consciousness of the subject and the change. Work with the regenerative formula on Project Adaptoid advances in parallel, with great strides being made in the mimicry of inhuman abilities. That research group must remain isolated from the rest and away from any diagnostic equipment that would allow study of the regenerative formula itself. This level of secrecy is prohibitive to progress, but the composition of the formula must remain known to me alone. I have enough of a foundation in psychiatry and human behavior to diagnose and categorize my own particular mental illnesses and pathology. I am not deluded. I know that chemistry can render my mind suboptimal, and that I must take responsibility for maintenance. Once, to eliminate the possibility of confirmation bias, I hired the best psychologist I could find and allowed unfettered access. I could tell she was horrified, but she hid it well. It was a waste. She refused to believe that I was not made who I am by trauma. She needed so badly for there to be some answer, a clear causation to my need to control, a reaction to a stimulus. The real answer, of course, scared her too much to consider. I'm a shadow without a light source. Trauma didn't make me. I made me. In my position, with my resources and abilities, how could I not do what I have done? It would be an abdication of my responsibility to my species not to. I had her killed afterwards, like I had always intended. After examining the artifact in question, I am certain it is Asgardian in origin. The name alone is a dead giveaway. Essence of ancient winter. A god's flair for the dramatic is unmistakable. Our tests suggest it was once part of a larger construct capable of much greater output. When in the possession of our QA subjects, the artifact emits some kind of aura, enhancing the holder's entire arsenal of attacks with lethal, cold fission energy. If we could replicate the effects of this artifact, we could enhance the combat effectiveness of our synthoids significantly. I especially appreciate the potential of this energy to literally freeze enemies where they stand. I'm sending this artifact along to our Asgardian research group. Perhaps Dr. Gable can unlock its secrets. AIM has scraped together enough vibranium to continue research into quantum causality for now. If the implications of our early tests are correct, we may be rewriting the common conception of linear time before the decade is out, but we will soon need a new supply. I've made initial overtures to the Wakandan government now that I am in a position to do so, but I don't believe it will amount to much. We will need far more than they will part with, willingly. Tarleton continues to act like my prominence in public life is something I desired, not something I endure. Before A-Day, I mirrored his resentment at being sidelined by Tony and the Avengers. I let that be our bond, a false longing for credit and fame, as if I didn't manufacture the situation to position myself exactly where I wanted to be. People are always willing to believe that you share the same desires. From there, it's all momentum and inertia. A gentle push here, a single word there. Then you let them do the work and think it was their idea all along. People can be so easy. This discussion is over. Your concerns are noted, and I'm insulted that you did not assume that I'd already weighed them against the benefits. Far from being a risk, Tony Masters' past as a SHIELD agent is added benefit to his appointment to the Adaptoid Project. Masters' innate photographic reflexes make him uniquely qualified to serve as the model and guide for our next phase of AI. His unequal talents of observation and mimicry will provide the baseline image for our combat simulations. But whereas his body is flawed and weak, the potential of our synthoids will be limitless. Once he has served his purpose, each generation of AI will be able to instruct the next. But for now, we need Masters. The sheer volume of research and patents we acquired in the takeover of Stark Industries almost overwhelmed us. It took months just to sort through them all. Initially, we separated them into multiple categories based on profitability. Stark kept so many toys for himself that AIM's initial expansion was paid for many times over with just a few product releases. Now that we've achieved the stability we require, we can make use of the tech that Stark himself put on ice. His squeamishness and hesitation in the face of his own research is a gift that we can't squander. I'm sending your team several nasty little ideas. I would like to see them incorporated into your training regimen immediately. And, Masters, no need to keep your methods secret from me. All I care about is results. Use anything at your disposal to achieve your ends. I brought you in for a reason. This article was contained in the memory buffer of Romanoff's personal phone when we acquired a partial copy. Unsent mail appears to show that Romanoff was considering contacting the journalist directly. A former Avenger infiltrated this organization, and before being discovered, managed to breach our security as well as steal billions of dollars. A former Avenger we had written off. I will accept my own responsibility in this failing, and so will you, whether you want to or not. We will be meeting tomorrow to discuss the systemic failure that allowed an undercover operative to access sensitive financial data and divert billions to a charity right under your noses. This was deliberate and meant to embarrass us. Expect repercussions. Romanoff was always the least invested of the Avengers, and it appears that even in the first months after A-Day, She was planning her departure. Our most reliable predictions show a strong probability that in her camp security breaches, which represented an enormous risk, Romanoff was searching for a way to profit from the chaos. Her contact with former black market associates that following week all but confirmed this prediction. While it might be attractive to offer a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, that doesn't match the observed behavior. What we do see, without much doubt, is a person who has already begun to revert to earlier learned survival behaviors. Miss Romanoff's time as an Avenger was brief compared to her time as a SHIELD agent or as a mercenary. Confronted with the disillusion of her social group, she will prioritize her own safety and freedom above all else. She will not take any risk that would threaten her livelihood. I felt the barest tickle of an idea last night, but I awoke this morning with utter certainty. My time is done here. The returns will diminish until I can no longer justify the loss of any more hours of my life. I've achieved far beyond my original goals, especially with what I've learned from Dr. Banner. But control of the Terrigen Project is already sliding from my grasp. Knew this was imminent. Working in such close proximity to Stark and his satellites had its privileges, but they were never going to put me, much less poor little George, on equal footing. So now I step on their throats and take it all. I find myself wanting to rush to the finish line, which means I must be cautious. The preparations must be precise and airtight, and even then it will be a high-wire act. But this is worth the risk. This is the next step, or none at all. If people think I'm lucky, then they're discounting something I've done to get here. I prefer it that way. But the truth is, there was always going to be an A-Day. Everything was accounted for, except, of course, that thing beneath the bay. Masters and his associates, after their false flag attack on the bridge, were supposed to steal the reactor, kidnap a member of the Avengers, and crash the Chimera. If I'd had it my way, it would have been much worse. I would have dropped it right on the city, with more high-definition footage of the disaster. But it was enough. It did exactly what I'd hoped. It broke the Avengers and cleared the path for AIM. And for me. Yes, I had to pivot my plans on the day, of course. Contingencies and improvisation are part of the job. Need to start preparations for a potential withdrawal sooner than anticipated. Not ready to leap just yet, but George is increasingly paranoid. I would have given anything for a few more stable years, but it's not going to be. The most likely risk is that somehow between the Avengers' insurgency, George's hubris, or internal failure, the public learns of the scope of what AIM has been doing. Or even just a hint. They'll want blood, a figurehead to be crucified. George never even wondered why I didn't want to take the public role. Even if they find some way to connect us to A-Day, I've made sure the last shreds of evidence point to him. There's also the possibility that even if we maintain secrecy, George grows beyond my ability to predict, or simply goes mad. If that's the case, I have to find some way to excise him from AIM and retain control, as well as survive. One way or another, our time together is up. Do you honestly think that you are my only pet senator? I don't need you. I've been planning this for a long time. And if you can't apply the leverage we require, someone else will. And then everyone can read all about the senseless home invasion robbery that ended in you and your family's deaths in next week's news. I told you in Des Moines when I purchased your services all those years ago that I would have a task for you someday. If you choose well, once this is over, you will no longer owe me a debt. We both know that's all you want. So be a big boy and get ready to dance for me. Banner will be your weak point. I've been preparing him for you, and I will tell you just where to dig. With the right pressure, he'll do more damage than you ever could. Then, when the Avengers are bleeding in public, I'll need you to sponsor the legislation I've attached. Don't change any of the language. Like all of this, it's non-negotiable. M. If A-Day had never happened, sooner or later, the Avengers would have threatened our ability to freely pursue our research. It wasn't enough that we removed them from the playing field. A-Day let us break them as an idea, and we did it to protect our future. It was never personal for me, and I'd do it again. Now with the Avengers gone, someone had to fill that gap. We made sure we had all the resources we needed to do so. AIM was a fortress for our future because I made it so. Sooner or later, I'm going to move beyond the need for AIM, or for George. And I think when that day comes, he and I will have some delicate negotiating to do. But the difference is, like always, I'll be ready. The following projects should be scrubbed from internal network and moved to the quantum backup system. I don't want anyone beyond our immediate project leads to even be aware of these initiatives. Most of these will look like folly, but there's a purpose behind each of these choices. Chances are none of them will come to use. You should remain familiar with the top-level descriptions of each of these initiatives and the roadmap to their completion. The nuclear-shielded arcologies will take the most time. Neither site will be completed within the next decade. Still, I would rather have a self-sustaining subterranean city than not. The majority of the other projects involve human trials, so you understand why it's important that they no longer be available to anyone without clearance. While you're migrating these databases, let's increase the resource allocation to both the teams working on rapid clone tissue maturation and post-death mind state recordings. I'd like to see those projects' proof-of-concept proposals as soon as possible. On a personal note, we haven't worked together before, so I thought it fair that we establish protocol. We allowed you to purchase the Stark holdings because I knew that it would personally infuriate Tony, which will in turn keep him emotional, reactive, and predictable. However, you will function effectively as a subsidiary of AIM. You will sell to us first at the prices I set. I must stress that this is not up for discussion or debate. I own enough shares to oust you before lunch, should you and I fall out of each other's good graces. I hope you will understand and appreciate my bluntness in this matter, but it's better that we get on the same page now. Please don't think of this as a threat, but a motivating promise. I look forward to many years of doing business together. M. Rappaccini.
Absurd rumors, Phil. I can say with utmost confidence that the Avengers are nothing more than terrorists. AIM is committed to finding a cure to the inhuman disease, and we're close. Hi, Phil. It's been a long night for all of us here at AIM HQ, but I'm confident the crisis is under control. Our new Adaptoid security forces their actions tell us all we need to know. If not for the efforts of my AIM synthoids, the Avengers would have crashed their helicarrier into Manhattan. We cannot let this happen again, and AIM will make certain it doesn't.